Isabella, you have written a novel, Interghost. It's a story of a lot of things, of diaspora and identity and trying to figure out what is home. At the heart, it's a story of a British Palestinian actress who is returning to her family's homeland. Just introduce us to Sonia Nasser.
Before I talk about it, my colleagues and I, as everybody knows, there is a genocide ongoing in Gaza, and my colleagues and I wondered if you would mind taking a moment of silence to acknowledge the 34,000 people who have been killed so far. That's the current count, although there are thousands who are trapped under the rubble. If you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me actually pivot. We'll come back to Sonia Nasser, but since you've introduced this, I'll point out the obvious. You published this book last spring, before the whole world turns its gaze on Palestinians, before war broke out and Hamas attacked Israel and Israel attacked Gaza, and here we are. Has that changed the way the novel has landed?
I think I'm often in a slightly funny position where people want to read literature about Palestine for an educational reason, because they want to learn, because they want to understand, because they're often told that the Middle East is very complex and complicated and it's too difficult to understand, so you shouldn't look too closely. And I am happy for my work to participate in that educational effort, but it is also literature, and it isn't, solely there to educate. That said, this book is about putting on a play. I mean, yes, there is the protagonist, the narrator is in the diaspora, but she's part, kind of significantly more than her journey. It's about her being part of a cast of characters who are drawn from across historic Palestine. They have different, legal statuses. They have different levels of freedom. They have different levels of exposure to or protection from violence, and they come together to put on a play. So it's a kind of it's about that more than anything else. So in a way, by having the geographic complexity of that cast coming together, although there is notably no participant from Gaza, although that absence is gestured to in the book. Yeah. Because it would be too logistically difficult, or maybe that's my imagination was blocked there, thinking how that would be possible. So in that sense, it does lead a reader who doesn't know Palestine. They're sort of taken to Palestine and they learn about it along the way through these experiences. But it is really driven by the characters above all.
Right, so just to flesh this out a little bit, Sonia Nasser, the British-American actress whose life has kind of fallen apart in London, where she lives, has gone to visit her sister, who lives in Haifa, and ends up getting talked into playing Gertrude, playing Hamlet's mom in a production in Arabic in Ramallah. So I found that just kind of a delightful side benefit, as I felt like I was rereading Hamlet and re-exploring all those characters as I was experiencing them through your character. Why put Hamlet at the center of this?
At first I was interested in theatre in Palestine. Theatre has a really interesting history in Palestine. It's a very politicized art form. It's an art form that, it's bodies in space, it's spontaneous, and there are particular histories of particular theatres. Hamlet I chose because, firstly, even though Shakespeare is British, but there's a global tradition of Shakespeare. There's a Soviet tradition, and there's also an Arabic tradition. And Hamlet specifically was banned in the Israeli prisons because it was seen as a dangerous text, a call to arms. Huh. So I thought that was interesting, and I could play with that. And it also had a particular history in Egypt. The to be or not to be speech was taken as a kind of coming to being of the Arab nation, the post-colonial nation. Shall we be or not be? So that was why Hamlet. And then I thought, well, most people know something about Hamlet. They know to be or not to be. They know, he wears black probably. There's something about a skull. There's a ghost. These things I kind of I didn't need to explain too much. You don't want to have to kind of use sort of, you can take some things for granted, that most readers will have some idea, at least that have heard of Hamlet.
You just said something I want to follow up on, and I'll invite you two to jump in as well. You just said, my book is not there just to educate, it's literature. What's the difference? What do you mean?
I think when we read novels, sometimes we do read to learn, but I also think something else is happening when we read. It's like, it's a time we spend with ourselves thinking imaginatively about other people. And oftentimes I think people spend a lot of time looking at their screen, they're at work, they'll watch television or they'll watch cinema when they're relaxing, but that's quite a kind of passive engagement with a story. Whereas when you read a novel, your mind is much more actively engaged in creating the world of the novel. So it uses the brain differently. And I think that it's not only the kind of cerebral sort of learning kind of, so you're reading a textbook or a history book, it's engaging with the emotions, it engages all these other parts of the self. And I think that's a more accurate, I think, description of what reading is, why we read. We don't really know why we read. We read for our souls, I think. It's not just because we want to know about other people so that we know. It has something else. It's something other kind of strange human activity that's kind of like dreaming. And I think that it's a bit of a category error sometimes when we put literature in the, we want to get a use out of literature, kind of clear use. I think it operates differently. Obviously, there are then uses. There are kind of novels that have played roles in history or that have educational properties, but there's something else going on as well.